Midnight on Earth podcast with your host, Jake Weaver. Engineered by Cedric Swan. Hey everybody, we are back with another episode of Midnight on Earth. I'm your host, Jake Weaver, and we're here to bring you more knowledge, more lights, and more love. We need so much love, and we have an incredibly loving human on the show. Sandra Wallin is here with us today, and she's going to be talking about the Council of Horses Oracle deck that she has, and guidebook, and all of the things related to this, the Council of Horses. It's absolutely amazing. We're going to talk to her about this soon, but first I need you to do something for me. Follow me on Instagram at midnight_on_earth. That is the address. You can follow me there. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you go to get your podcast, click that button that connects us so you know when people come on with this really good information. The Council of Horses, my God, I want to learn everything about this. I'm sure you would too. You get that notification. And most importantly, tell a friend, tell someone that you know that loves these type of podcasts. You know their frequency, you know our frequency. Match the frequencies, bring them here, midnightonearth.com. Okay, so we're just about to talk to Sandra, but first I have to read her bio, so here we go. Sandra Wallin, MA, is a beloved educator, psychotherapist, expressive artist, writer, and horse listener. A sought-after speaker and workshop leader, she teaches equine and nature-guided wellness worldwide. Currently, she is writing her doctoral thesis on the healing power of horses. Wow. She lives in Maple Ridge, British Columbia, and she's here with us today. Hello, Sandra.
Hey, Jake. Happy Halloween.
It's Halloween. I can't believe it. As we're recording this, it is Halloween. It's a magical day. It's a really interesting frequency. It's tapping into the other side in a way. There's some recognition, I believe, like the Day of the Dead, where we know that there's somewhere we're going after this human life.
I think it's also a great space and time for us to be speaking about horses who work with us in this ordinary and non-ordinary reality as well. So I think that, I think, as we said earlier, the pumpkins and the horses have aligned for us to be speaking today.
Okay, so let's talk about this. Let's get right into it. The Council of Horses. So these horses, they're almost like angels in a way. They're ethereal horses. They're living perhaps in another dimension, a higher dimension, and we're able to tap into their energies. Tell me about this.
Well, the council is made up of mythic horse beings and legendary horses, sort of the horses that have been galloping through our stories and our art for millennia. And even if you go back into the ancient cave drawings of prehistoric man, horses have always been part of that. And the council is also made up of the everyday horses we share our life with here, that are in our backyards, that are in the pastures that we drive by, that we share our lives with. And so there's a real beautiful sort of amalgamation of teachings and wisdom and counsel from this Council of Horses that is just so, I think, prevalent in terms of the age and the time we're going through. I think that their teachings are timeless, and I think our relationship with horses is as well.
Wow. So essentially, they are just like, you could say, the extra dimensionals, the ETs, the angels. They're one group of light beings showing up as these horses and this connecting with this energy to heal people.
I love that you're saying it that way, actually, Jake, because when a number of years ago, quite a while ago, I was teaching a workshop with some friends who are shamanic practitioners over on Salt Spring Island, which is one of the Gulf Islands between Vancouver and Vancouver Island. beautiful, magical place. And we were asking the participants, we were doing a shamanic journey, and we were asking them to pose the questions to essentially horse consciousness. Why have horses so benevolently offered themselves to humanity? Because when you look at our history with them, we have not been the kindest of companions over the years.
We've really used them as a resource and barely acknowledged their consciousness.
I think use is a sad but relevant word for sure. And so when we were doing the journey, I thought, well, goodness sakes, I'm going to ride along on this journey as well and just see what kind of information I get. And what I was shown was it stuck with me. It was so profound. It was horse consciousness and human consciousness and other forms of consciousness live sort of in a galaxy far, far away, if we want to play with the language. And because of the gifts and the elevated frequencies that we existed in, we made a decision to travel throughout the universe and to bring those gifts to other worlds and other planets. And what the picture that I was shown was very much like the dandelions that we have here, where when they catch the wind, when they've gone to seed and they catch the wind, there's that beautiful little seed at the bottom, but that little helicopter sort of parachute that carries it off through the skies. And horse consciousness was seeded into one of those and human consciousness in another. And we made this agreement to float throughout the universe and to land here upon this beautiful blue planet that we live on now. And what happened between there and here was significant because horse consciousness remembered that sacred vow, that sacred contract that we had made. But in the arrival, in the coming, in the journeying between there and here, we got perhaps jostled about a little bit much and forgot. And so this idea of horses have been so patient and so benevolent because they're waiting for us to remember our sacred contract, to remember who they are and to remember who we are.
Interesting. So they came here as an energetic companion to help us evolve. And you're saying because that consciousness probably is connected to source in a different way, they retained that data where we as humans, probably through various traumas and other situations, disconnected from that information in some way.
Yeah, that's what I was shown.
Wow. And they're waiting for us to reconnect, but their role, you're saying, is more than just companionship and transportation, which is usually what people look at horses as. Even if they love horses, they're still kind of, unless they own them and really build a relationship, they're just kind of seeing them as transportation and companionship. So tell us more about that. What else is horse consciousness doing for and with us?
Oh gosh, I think horse consciousness it's showing up in so many ways. You know, the old saying of a horse of a different color. I think each horse collectively and individually has, as you were saying, relationships, that we have relationships with them. So I know that the horses I've shared my life with here, each of them has a special frequency, special set of gifts that they bring. And in their experiences and in their coming togethers with people, the gifts are profound. And I will also add too that for some of the horses, it's about, I've really had a blessing of being able to teach with horses globally, but I'll come back to speak about the herd here because I know them the best. And when I look at the cross section, the dynamics, the versatility with which they meet people, it's astounding. So whether somebody is coming for, at least from their intention, to work on their leadership and their communication skills, or whether someone's coming to be held in a space because they've just lost their child and they need to be able to be honored in that place of sorrow and grief, or whether it's helping children who have been bullied or disconnected from the community in some way find a place of belonging. Horses are able to do all of those things. And then there's also the horses in story that inspire us when we think about Pegasus, who whose hoofs, who was born from the blood of Medusa, and whose hoofs struck the ground and created the Hippocrene, which is the stream of the muses, where the muses were born from. So the source of creativity. When we think, oh, I'm getting goosebumps. So when we think about the connection between our, so yes, in the everyday of all of the things we're talking about, but in the most expansive reaches of our imagination and our creativity, where I think humanity certainly has a capacity to excel. We have the prefrontal cortex to be able to engage with higher level consciousness. It's not in any way to say that other creatures don't as well, but we just show up with it in a different way. And I think that sacred contract we were talking about a moment ago, that horses in a nonverbal capacity perhaps are at the heart of our inspiration and our creativity, and hopefully also our compassion.
Yes, they have that gentle energy. If you've ever been around a horse, even a horse that's skittish in a way, they still have that higher energy coming from them. It's a healing energy. Most people talk about that love horses. And it makes sense that in a spiritual sense, there's even more than we can even possibly imagine. So you're saying that the horses themselves can connect to this higher energy consciously and perhaps send it to us in a healing way.
I might even go further and say it's not necessarily that they're connecting to it, that they are it.
Oh, wow.
Could I be so bold as to say that?
Yes, this is what we do. We're bold on this show. You can go as bold as you would like. I mean, I love horses. I don't own any, and I haven't spent a significant time around them, but I love the energy. But tell me about how you tapped into the council then. So you're building relationships with horses over the years. How did you start to tune into that higher information?
I would say that I've probably been tuned into it from the beginning, from the time I was born, and it's just shifted and been malleable over the years. I think that, and you probably recognize this as well, that when we're young, we come into the world connected in a different way than how we grow. The growth, the environment, the challenges, the bumps along the way kind of knock us a little bit off center, if you want to think about it that way. And I think those of us that have been so fortunate to have horses in our lives, I think we tend to stay a little bit more centered, a little bit more connected to authentic connection, if we want to phrase it that way. And I always was drawn to horses, called by horses, sketched horses, pretended I was a horse, believed that I was, riding the little broom and cantering about on my horse. But we could never have horses. It was outside of the fiscal range of when I was growing up. But that never stopped me. And this is one of the things that I always like to say too, when people say, oh, well, it's impossible. Well, we'll just pull from Picasso. Everything we can imagine is real. And I always imagined being with horses. And so finding a way of doing that maybe wasn't typical, but for me it was like, okay, I just have to be with horses. How can it work? And up the mountain where we lived, there was a beautiful riding facility, and I would ride my bike up there. And I asked in a very humble, hopeful way if there was anything that I could do to help out. And she said, yeah. And of course, you know what they do. They give you a manure rake. And that's where we always start. And even today, Jake, when I'm outside picking up the paddocks and picking up the manure every morning, which is where I was before we got on the call, there's this, it sort of forces us to get grounded, to be earthy, to be connected with the earth and the horses and the smells and the senses and the raven that lands in the tree and talks to me every morning. And whether it's rainy or windy or snowy or sunny or whatever, connecting in with the elements. So I think the having of horses in our lives, the sharing our lives with them, precipitates us staying connected because we need to be outside, which I think is a lovely enforce.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then in terms of how the council came to be, I really do believe I've been receiving their counsel, their guidance, their mentorship, their friendship ever since I started, well, forever, but really palpably once I started volunteering. And that was when I was 12.
Wow.
But I didn't get quote unquote my own horse until I turned 39. And that was the beautiful Grace, who's in the Council of Horses because she, above all else, above and beyond any other horse, has been my most profound and greatest teacher. I call her the equine apothecary, and because she can work with whoever comes out in whatever way they need it most. She shows up for them, and whether we know that that's what we need or not, she has a way of tapping into, and I think all horses do. They read what's going in the subconscious in the subconscious programming, in the interface, in our physiology, in our mindset, in our however you want to think about the different layerings of who we are, past,
Sure.
present, and future. And they hone in on exactly what needs to be activated. I had a friend who, I just love this story. I had a friend who was diagnosed with testicular cancer, and he'd never been around horses. He was quite terrified of them, actually. And he phoned me and said, Sandra, this is what's happened, and I just keep hearing that I'm supposed to come out and be with the horses. Would that be okay? And I said, of course it would be okay. Of course it would. And at that point, I shared just my life with two horses, Grace and Chiron. And Chiron, who's normally Mr. Busybody, whenever anybody comes out near the pasture or goes in at all, he has to be up front and center and completely involved. But this particular day, he stayed in the shelter and didn't come out at all. And my friend and I walked into the center of the paddock, and Grace turned and beeline for us. I mean, she wasn't galloping, but she was walking fast. She was coming forward. And he goes, oh my God, she's coming, she's coming. I said, I know. He goes, is she going to stop? And I said, I believe she's going to stop. And she kind of did, right in front of him. And she put her nose right to just below his belt. And his eyes were wide, and he said, what's she doing? And I said, let's just wait, because I trusted her implicitly to be able to do exactly what needed to be done. She's held space for children, little ones with autism, all the way up to corporate execs. So I figured, oh no, she's got this in hand in hoof. And so she's just stood there, and she kind of started to breathe big, deep breaths and exhale in a really audible, profound way. And it got louder and louder and deeper and deeper. It was kind of almost like she was a fire-breathing dragon. She was just breathing in and then exhaling right into the area below his belt. And she did that for about 10 minutes. And then she dropped her head to the ground, did one final exhale, and then left, turned around and left, like done. Okay, session over. And we both stood there kind of in awe with our mouths dropped a little bit.
I bet.
He said, she knows. And I said, yeah, I have no doubt that she does. And then I heard from him a few weeks later, and he said, Sandra, and people say this to me all the time, you're never going to believe it. I said, well, tell me, what am I never going to believe? And he said, the cancer is gone.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And that's just one of the incredible number of stories with this incredible mare. And her name is Grace. So how could anything other than this be part of how she comes into the world?
That's an incredible story. When I was hearing you tell it, what I envisioned was almost that the horse Grace was pulling the energy out, the cancer out of his auric field with those breaths, pulling it out, and then it disintegrated because it didn't have that life force. That's what I was feeling. But yeah, wow. This is not unusual. Many people do talk about the healing benefits of these horses, but you created a way to divinate with horses, horse divination. So as you develop the relationship between 12 and 39, what were some of the downloads? Like, what were some of the big ones where you're like, okay, there's something going on. Like, I'm getting downloads, this information's coming in, it's all authentic, and I'm feeling it in my soul. Like, when were those moments?
I think some of them were more pinnacle-esque, and some of them were more, but when I started, sort of a big aha for me was, I worked as a school teacher and counselor, and always was wanting to do equine guided or animal assisted nature. When I was a classroom teacher, we always were out in nature, spending time down in the ground, looking at the ants and paying attention to the clouds and being outside in nature's classroom as much as we could be. So that was always part of me and constant. And because I didn't have my own horses until 39, I would find, again, ways. And there was a woman who lived in a town next to the school I was working at. And I, again, just kind of dared greatly, to borrow from Brené Brown. I just thought, well, let's have this idea and let's just go out and see. All that can happen is someone says no. And I said, is there any way that I could start to bring some of the students that are on my caseload from the school out here to be with your horses? And she said, absolutely.
Wow.
And what I saw there just captivated my heart. And it was always, you probably are not surprised to hear that the students that most needed to come out and be with the horses are very often the students that were marginalized or thought of as different or just didn't quite fit in one way or another. And so bringing out those kids either individually or in small groups, and just watching how they transformed in the company of horses, how these young boys who were categorized as having ADHD, when horses were around, no problem focusing on the tiniest little detail of what it was they were there to accomplish. The young ones who were being bullied, and how they were so held in sacred space when they would be with the horses. And some of the young ones too on the spectrum that didn't connect really with anything or anyone in their lives. And I just have to tell a story.
Oh, please,
this one's
please.
popping into my head right now. My beautiful Grace passed away a couple of years ago, and after she had passed, I was holding a workshop where there was they were doing their graduation, and one of the women who was graduating wanted to work with children that were on the autistic spectrum or had been given that diagnosis. And so she had some families with children that were experiencing that come out to the farm. And Kyron, who I had referenced earlier, although now he's 21, so he has matured over these last 20 years, I thought, okay, I'm not so sure how he's going to do with these young ones running around and the echolalia and the calling and the moving. And I just thought, okay, he's usually a little bit, he's very sensitive. So I just wondered how he would do. And lo and behold, it was like, I don't know that he was channeling Grace, but it felt like Grace was completely there at the same time. Wow. He walked up to this little one and put his head on the top of the head, exactly the way Grace used to do, and just stood so quietly and just kind of whiffled his hair just at the top. And then this little one raised his face. And normally, again, I would be, because Kyron will tug at ears or he'll pull on toggles on I just thought, oh, okay, I'm really, really ready. I'm really watching. And he just so softly rested his nose on this little one's face. And then this little one put his hand up and touched Kyron's nose, and just crying, thinking about it. And then the little one, I have a sandbox out there for the horses, so they have something soft to lay in and sleep in. So the little one was then in love with the sand. So he's playing around in the sand. And Kyron walked over, being curious, because that's what he is, but also so softly and so tenderly. And he stood there while this little one was playing in the sand. Of course, with the caregivers, we're all around, we're all there. It's a perfectly safe spot. And then the little one again looked up at him and walked over to him and put his hand up on his big white body and leaned his head against his barrel, his chest. Wow. And it was almost like, I don't know if this is true or not, but I just imagined that he was listening to Kyron's heartbeat.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking intuitively.
It was incredible. And so this is the horse that previously he's not for beginners, right? He's not a beginner's horse. And yet here he was, so tenderly and so gently being there for this little boy.
Wow. They have that sensitivity. They're reading the energy. If you're trying to think about it from the horse's perspective, they're reading the energy. They're seeing the deficiencies or whatever's happening in their energy field, and then projecting an energy that can heal them. And they have their own higher frequency, but it seems like they have the ability to manipulate energy into beings, probably more than just humans, to heal them. It's huge. This is like really huge. But then again, this is how you tapped into the council. So when do you feel like the council themselves started coming to you? Now, I know there was other horses, but then there was surely a watershed moment.
There was, so Kim McElroy, who's an amazing artist down in Washington, and I have been friends for years and years. And we both loved working with wisdom card decks. And I use them in my private practice. I use them in workshops, and just always wanted there to be a deck that we created ourselves. So it was really, as much as I think the horses had been gathering, it wasn't until we kind of, again, dared greatly and declared, well, let's create something together, that we started to delineate and ask who wanted to be present. And so I use a process called surrogation, which is something that I teach in psychological kinesiology, or Psych-K. And what it does is it's a quantum connection with the field, so to speak, but it also can be a connection, as long as it's safe and appropriate, to tune into the frequency or the consciousness of other beings. And so collectively, I would just spend time, meditate, tune in, be with my horses, and start to ask and pay attention to which horses were showing up that wanted to be part of the council. And there's way more than we had time to fit into this
Really?
First deck. So there's 40 horses that are part of the Council of Horses Oracle that just was released, which we're really excited about. But I'm just, again, I was going through my old notes and seeing, oh, goodness sakes, well, we didn't have time to do this, and I didn't have time to write that, and oh my goodness. So it's kind of like they're still waiting in the wings. They're circling and running around going, hey, we're still here. And that's not to say that they're not part of the deck that exists now. I believe that every single horse that's in the cards now is here because they're being supported by all of the collective of horses as well, the consciousness, the council, present, past, and future.
Yes, it was created in a very intentional way, and it was created in a correct way. Even though there's more information, perhaps another deck coming, this is still a complete experience. And would you say the Oracle deck works like a tarot deck? Or for people that don't really understand the Oracle deck concept, could you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, we originally thought that it would be called wisdom cards because your community would completely embrace the idea of the oracle and the oracular nature of horses. And I would absolutely say that all horses are oracular. In fact, ancient cultures used to use the term called hippomancy, which is viewing horses as divine and viewing them as messengers from the divine and paying attention to their behavior, either as individual horses or how the movements of a herd, how they would migrate. They would pay attention to horse physiology, to their body movements, also to when they would find horse bones, and even the idea of a horseshoe that goes back into those ancient times of hippomancy. So paying attention to omens, the good omens and not as good omens around what are the horses telling us. So the idea of horses being messengers and also carriers of humanity to the divine, but also in the case of, if you want to think about Muhammad's night ascension, his night journey, it was a winged mare, Al-Barak, who Archangel Gabriel asked if this mare would carry Muhammad, and she agreed because she felt that he was worthy enough for her to do that for him, and she carried him on the night journey. And so we're seeing that horses, and even in the storytelling, the myths, the legends, the ancient texts, we're seeing, like the Bible talks about, and the heavens opened up and appeared a white horse. So you think that these, and that's giving me goosebumps too, the connections between horses and humans have been so profound. But the oracular part The difference between tarot and oracle cards is the tarot is really about the fool's journey, and the tarot cards are set up with a major arcana and then 4 suits in each in minor arcanas, which have been read. I mean, the tarot has been used. I don't even know how long it's been around.
Probably
Jake.
time immemorial in various forms, but at least
so.
5,000 years.
Well, and the I Ching, which is also a form of a divinatory form, in the deck is Longma, and Longma was the dragon horse that emerged from the river, and the teacher that brought forward the I Ching into the world back there in ancient China. The hexagrams were on the scales, were in the scales of this dragon horse that emerged from the river. So again, here is horses bringing the oracular wisdom forth on his body for humans to read, for humans to see. And I think that that's happening now in the everyday. When we look into, I remember there was one group of kids that were living on the streets. So they didn't really have homes to go back to. They came out, and we had some time here with the horses, and this one young man looked into Grace's eyes, and then he looked back at me and he goes, "Mrs. Wallin, her eyes are so beautiful." He said, "I can see myself in her eyes, and I feel like she sees me, and it's safe there."
Wow. Wow.
So kids that are living on the street are coming out and having a chance to look into the eyes of the horse, and what are they seeing reflected back? Themselves, their own beauty, their own possibility, which of course is how horses see us, because they see our true potential. They don't see, the labels on our jeans or the car we drove up in, or the places, the decisions we made that weren't so happy and healthy along the way. They see the pureness of our hearts. And so I think this idea of hippomancy, certainly these wisdom cards, these oracle cards, are designed so that whether you're a horse lover or not, the teachings of horses are irrefutable. And to be able to, and in the guidebook, there's a number of different samples that talk about working with the cards in terms of what we call spreads.
Yes.
So there's different spreads you can do. So you bring your question, you bring your intention, you bring your dream, your goal, your challenge to the herd, so to speak, and then draw cards to see what the horses have to share about what it is that you're bringing. Just like would happen if you were here for an equine guided session, we're bringing our current condition, our current reality to the interface with horses, and we're seeing what the horses have to share, or how they inform us, how they move, how they ignore us, how they drop a shoulder into us, how they come and stand with us, how they breathe into us, how they turn away, how they come in. That's kind of what's happening really when we're working with these cards in the deck, is which horse is showing up. Because if there was a herd of horses in a field and we were going out to work with them, very often it's going to be one horse that will leave the herd and come and pay attention to that person. It's kind of interesting actually, when there's a whole herd of possibilities, to notice that one horse very often will choose to be part of that session or part of that conversation.
Interesting. Like it feels that frequency and wants to contribute, because it almost seems like the horse consciousness reminds me of whale consciousness or dolphin consciousness. There seems to be like this similar connection there, because people often say that whale consciousness and dolphin consciousness are actually higher than human consciousness. And I kind of get that same feeling from horse consciousness.
I think you're absolutely spot on. And you just, I have to share this story.
Please. I love these. You're amazing. Go.
Well, first, a couple things before though. When I was out in Ontario, I was working with some friends in the equine community, and she had a shamanic teacher who told her, who she then told me, she goes, he said that horses are just land dolphins. And I thought, that makes so much sense. But back to the story relating to whales. Our family was in Maui a couple of years ago. And at this point, our agent had been presenting the Council of Horses out to all over, and we kept getting no's, kind no's, but no's. And It had been a couple of years of us working and rewriting and playing with the feedback and trying to get it quote unquote right. But but we felt that it was right. I mean, we were following the counsel of the horses around how they wanted to share what it is that they wanted to teach and how they wanted it to be brought out into the world. So we were there, and it was in February, so that's when the humpbacks are there with their babies, and there's just whales everywhere in the ocean around the islands. And I was out and I was swimming, and I had my head down, and I could hear the songs of the humpback whales as the males are singing and courting the females underwater. Literally,
Wow.
as soon as you put your head under, it's like the water's amplifying their song, and you can just hear it. It was so beautiful. And I have a huge thing for whales, so I love that
I love whales too. No, I felt that.
it.
I was in picking that up, but yes, please, this is amazing.
Must have. And so it was time to get out, and I thought, well, my head was under, and I was listening to the song. This idea came into my head that, well, maybe the whales can help. So when I stood up, I sort of put a prayer, or sort of a beseeching out into the waves, and I said, if there's any way that you could help, if you have any influence over what's going on, whether it's going to happen or not, it would just be nice to know one way or the other. Let the dream go, or keep the heart beating and helping it come to life. It would be really helpful, because I was starting to feel a little bit, well, maybe this isn't meant to be. As much as I've dreamed it into being, it isn't quite being yet. And so when we went back to the house, I opened email later that evening, and there was an email from our agent saying Inner Traditions and Bear and Company would love to publish The Council of Horses.
Oh, wow.
So I believe the whales, the equine cetacean combination, they were communicating with each other and pulled a few strings.
I think everybody's on that team. When you're in that higher bandwidth of information, yeah, they're working with a level of reality that's not necessarily beyond human comprehension, but it's not our daily consciousness. They're on a different, higher wavelength. But tell me about the language that they have, because I noticed that you said that the horses have a language of their own. Can you tell me about their language?
Well, I think horses speak in frequency. I think they speak in metaphor and symbolism. And they would talk about the hippomancy. So the movement, if you watch horses move, either as individuals or as herds, you talk about a murmuration of starlings or a school of fish, how there's that sociosensual communication, that the communication and the information or the language that exists in the space between beings, just like we have it as well. But we've because we live often such insular lives, we're not necessarily in community and moving in community like we used to. So I imagine it's within us as well. We've just lost contact, lost touch with it. So the horses have this capacity to be present in present time, but I believe also to exist beyond that. There's been a number of people that have come out to spend time here, and especially Kyron, who is a bit of a veil jumper, a little bit of he goes out into the field, I think, and does his magic and his work. They'll come and they say, that I've been dreaming about that horse for the last 5 months or the last however many years, and now here he is standing in front of me. So I think that some horses also are more grounded in the here and now, and I think other horses have this capacity, just like we as humans do, to be able to go out into the outer realms and to work in the field out there. So this ability to communicate, they don't use the words that we use. So when I'm in surrogation or I'm paying attention and kind of tuning into the stories that want to be shared, it's being communicated, of course, like it goes through my filter. So I'm putting it into language. But when I'm out in the field with horses and I'm working with someone, very often part of my role is translator, so that I'm communicating when a horse is doing this or doing that, I never unequivocally say what anything means, because I know that, if you're thinking about being a Jungian analyst and they say, well, this blue lake means this, I always like to leave that there's an opportunity for some ideas around what it could mean, but ultimately whoever's there will decide what that means for them.
Right.
So then the translation part, I think, is what my gift and role was as well in the creating of the deck, was to be able to listen, and not necessarily to words, but in a language that goes deeper than words, what it is that the horses wanted to share, but then to translate that into written language so that someone can open a guidebook and read. And yet what we're very clear about right at the start of the guidebook is that there's so many ways of interpreting information that it really needs to be the individual who tunes into that. And where's the resonance in that for you? We all know when we lean into truth and when we're pushed back by its opposite. So really noticing where there's that alignment in frequencies, and that can happen through story, but it also can happen through the beautiful art that's in the deck too, because part of what I believe is that old saying about a picture is worth 1,000 words. We can look upon, like that young man who looked upon into the eyes of grace and was able to see his reflection there, and what that meant to him went way deeper than words, way beyond words. And when I started working with children and adolescents and teens with the horses, and thought I was doing it the right way by kind of being more talk oriented, they let me know very, very early on that talking about things was not where it was at, Mrs. Wallin. That's where the expressive arts started to come in. So they would paint, or they would draw, they would sculpt, they would write stories and poetry about the meaning of what was going on in the sessions for them. So the translating the language of horses, we do our best through our conscious human brains to be able to convey that into words, but really it's so much bigger and so much broader than that.
It sounds like channeling. When I have people talk about channeling, you're channeling this consciousness, you're interfacing, but there's so much information moving back and forth. And then through this gargantuan amount of information, and there's so much love, that the foundation of it all, you're trying to filter down what you can into the human experience. And you were able to do that in a way that created this deck, which is like mind-blowing. The art, by the way, Kim McElroy did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
The deck's absolutely amazing. So
gorgeous, isn't it?
Yes. And so you connected with each of these horses, understood what each of their roles were, their frequency, what their healing aspect was, and then put their story within this deck. So each card represents the frequency of each of these horses, these council of horses. And whatever healing you need, whatever frequency you're deficient or whatever's happening, you're going to be energetically attracted to those cards. Am I understanding this correctly?
Yeah, it's sort of when we come to the field, when we come to the pasture line, when we come to the deck, and we pose a question, or we bring a dream or a heartache to the conversation with horses. I'm going to use the term superconscious. It's like this, the epiconscious mind reaches into the field hours when we're working with pulling a card, but it's a mutual choosing. I think sometimes we're a bit arrogant in the fact that we think, oh, well, I've chosen this. Actually, there's a sacred reciprocity that's happening. Otherwise, I wouldn't have picked that card, or that horse wouldn't be the horse that's coming to me. There's an agreement. And one of my most beloved teachers, Barbara Rector, talks about it in terms of con su permiso. It means with your permission. And there's an agreement. When I teach it, I talk about it as an invitation, the namaste effect. So the light in me sees and honors the light in you. So there's no accident to the cards that we draw with when we're working with intention, and there's no accident to the horses that show up for us when we're in the field with them. It very much is a higher level choosing, I would say up in the quantum realm, there's an agreement between these two consciousnesses to come together and have a conversation or to have an experience together that is meant to be transformative, is meant to be healing. And very often, again, our conscious mind makes up 1 to 5% of our consciousness. Sometimes we just can't quite, get hold of it in that finite space. So there's a place too where we need to be in a place of allowing and surrendering and trusting and to be present with whatever's going on, knowing that it might be far deeper and far higher than our consciousness can actually grab hold of.
Exactly. We get these fragments, and even in our best moments, we can only process so much. I mean, they're big, profound moments, but there's still even more information. So you create this deck with your friend, and it's so amazing. But what else is the council telling you? Because this deck is there, it has their story, but it seems like now you have this really strong interface with the 40 horses and more that are coming. Are they giving you any messages? Is there anything they're talking about in relation to today's world or what they're sensing about humanity's story?
Well, it would be really fun to pull a card around that and to see which horse says what. So this is the exact way that we use it, Jake. Exactly the way we would work with a deck like this. Say, well, what do the horses have to say about this current state of affairs? And recognizing, you said earlier that the horse has the frequency, and I agree with that. And I also believe that they're shapeshifters in frequency. So if you need Grace to show up for you this way, she will. If someone else needs Grace to show up for her a different way, she will. So I think that every single horse also has the capacity to be malleable because they're so expansive in their, if you think about a spectrum of light, they're light, but they have all of those different frequencies and colors of light within them. So
Right.
I might need to see indigo today. And so Grace shows me indigo.
Right.
But tomorrow I might need to see violet, and she shows me violet. So I really do believe in this matching, this incredible matching between horses and humans that it's just such a gift.
It does kind of give you chills. They can meet you where you're at energetically, whatever that frequency is. They have it all in their bandwidth. You're projecting this frequency. Well, okay, they can dial that in, meet you where you're at, meet the next person where they're at, all the while still containing all of those higher frequencies in their bandwidth.
Right on.
Wow, but yes, I would love to pull a card. That sounds so cool. Let's do that.
Okay. So can you share it? I've got the cards here. So now just get back in touch with the question you asked, if you'd be so kind.
Okay.
And then say it out loud again.
Okay. Let's see. Let me just dial this in a little bit.
Yeah.
Make sure I get it right. What does the Council of Horses think about the future of humanity? Are we moving towards our ascension? And if so, is it guaranteed? Is it inevitable? Is it our destiny?
So so you put that in the field. And so now we're just going to draw a card.
Okay.
So I know we can see this. This is Pegasus.
Oh, wow. The Pegasus that we were talking about earlier. Yeah. Oh my God.
And flowing with inspiration. So let's see what the guidebook says. I'll just turn. The nice thing about I love the guidebook. It's just so user friendly. Like I can hold it in my hand, so I can tuck this in my pocket when I'm outside with the horses and just pull it out whenever I feel like it. A card. Well, who am I kidding? Well, it doesn't go by when I'm not pulling cards.
It fits in the box essentially, so it can fit in your pocket.
It does, and then the cards can come with it. So here's the counsel from, so the question that you asked, the thing I also love about the cards was it was important for there to be, when people drew the card, there'd be a little clear message for humanity, but also a message for horsekind, because those of us that live and spend our lives with horses who aren't necessarily tapping into that field of information, but would really love some help and guidance around why something might be going on for their horse or how they might be able to help a horse, there's a message in here for horse kind too. So we really wanted from the horses. So the council is offering horses to counsel, pardon me, to humanity, but also to horses. And then each card has a story from first person, so to speak. So the horse is telling you who they are a little bit. I mean, there could be volumes for each horse in terms of their story. So the hard part was actually titrating down into about 400, 500 words per card to make it manageable. And then there's a section called the council, which I think is where we'll go with this. So the council from Pegasus related to the question that you just posed. The prospect of creating something new can be as daunting as capturing a winged horse to a person sitting at their keyboard wanting to write the next great book, an artist staring at a blank canvas, or an executive trying to come up with a brilliant campaign. Whatever you want to create, I am here to take you deep within your core to the source of your own hippocrene. It may at times seem hidden within dark internal reservoirs, and the pressure of too much thinking, too much doing, and not enough time may have kept these waters of inspiration untapped. I've come to strike away these mantles of doubt so your inspiration may surface. As it does, do not try to contain it. Allow it to flow through the natural expressions of how you feel. Emotions add color to the painter's palette and words to the poet's prose. Be mindful of the criticism of others, lest it staunch your flow before you gain momentum. Equally damaging is self-criticism. If you hold an image of perfection that can never be obtained, you might clip your own wings and limit what you have come to achieve. Like me, you are born of water. And though it is natural for there to be ebbs and flows, the wellspring lives within you.
Wow. So if I was going to interpret that, I would say that's a hugely hopeful message. We can create whatever we want, and we have this incredible support, but we want to do it in a natural way. Let it unfold. Don't force it. Take action. Make it happen, but don't fall into anxiety or despair if it's not going at a certain rate of acceleration that you feel it needs to be. That's just my own interpretation.
No, I love it. And also, one of the parts that struck me, to use the language of Pegasus striking the ground and releasing our source of creativity, says emotions. Emotions add color to our palette and words to our prose.
Yes.
I think that when we're wanting to manifest something, we want to be in the feeling of it. And the prayer mirrors, actually, there's another card in here that talks about the lost mode of prayer, the power of prayer, not necessarily religious prayer, but prayer in terms of when we imagine the prayer as already being answered. So coming back to the manifestation of new reality, to notice where we're emotionally connected to it, because emotion is this powerful manifesting mechanism. And then seeing the world as if it's already, seeing the dream as if it's already come true. So for wanting to create a world where compassion reigns, where kindness is commonplace, where we actually return to sender in terms of the consciousness that horses and humanity originally came to seed here on this planet, then to borrow from Gandhi, we want to be the change that we wish to see in the world.
Yes.
And that's as simple and as beautiful a statement as that is. It's not always the easiest thing, because our programming tends to influence the choices and the world that we see, the world that we create. So horses really do see and help us get back to the original blueprint, I think. And so, as does nature, spending time in nature. So I think one of the greatest ways we can actualize this new reality, which is in a reality that's already existed. When we listen to Bruce Lipton, he talks about this is heaven. Heaven is on earth. It's not somewhere else, but it's our responsibility to tend the garden. What kind of gardeners are we? We want to be emotional gardeners, like with high frequency emotion. And we want to be in a place of complete honoring of all and who that is. I've heard you say before on others of your other interviews that you've done the illusion of separation. And Einstein says that it's an optical delusion, that we actually are all intimately and intricately connected, that we are all one, if you want to put it in that way. So that what we do unto others, we are doing unto ourselves. But sometimes humanity just doesn't see it that way.
Well, again, it's what you said, the programming, the paradigms, the various things that kept us in separation. Some of those guests and other people feel like the separation is just part of our story. There's some value in it as we evolve back to that love-based connection. Perhaps this is how we understood matter and technology, that we had to sink into this lower frequency to work with matter. And now that we have matter kind of pretty much mastered in a way, we can, and creating things out of material things, we can then move back into that spiritual frequency with this other knowledge. Perhaps. Now that's all just conjecture, but I know that we're moving towards love. And that's really the biggest things. And I think that that's what the Horse Council is telling us as well, because they're in that place already. You're, like you said, they are it. They're holding that frequency and bringing that into our little matrix here.
I like how you said that.
Well, it is a false I mean, we're creating it. We're co-creating it with the programming that we have automatically. And this is what we've created, but we can create something else. And we have so much help and so many people giving us great information about how to do it correctly, including the Council of Horses. Yeah. So we can do it. We just have to get more programming, raise our vibration, love each other. And remember, the biggest thing, I think, is that whether you're a horse or a human or any conscious being, you're living lights. And therefore, that light means that we are all one. We're just that living light, and we're connected to every being on the planet. And in fact, we're connected to every being in the universe and the multiverse. We're all that living light. And when we wake up to that, when we really grasp that concept internally and we really integrate it as humans, that's going to be the movement forward. That's going to be the frequency shift when we start from that place.
That's gorgeous. One of the horses that I didn't have time to write, we didn't get to put into the deck, this deck, is Equus Lumina, which is the horse of light.
Yeah. So is there a most elder horse? I know that there's the Eohippus, if I hopefully pronounced that correctly.
Yeah, you did great.
Woo! Eohippus was the first horse appearing 56 million years ago. So that's the archetype, the source of that frequency.
The horse, the dawn horse, the progenitor of horses, and looks very different than the horses that we know of today. So it looked, if you have the cards, when you have a chance to look at them, you can see that Kim drew Eohippus the way it would have appeared, now an artist's rendering, inside of the modern day horse. So you can see the comparative of the two. It's quite beautiful.
Now, let me ask you this. This is kind of off the cuff a little bit, but we know there's so many advanced civilizations in a material sense around the universe, levels of evolution that are both above and below where the humans happen to be at right now. Are there planets where horse consciousness evolved into the dominant species and perhaps are human-like in the sense that they have lives and buildings and vehicles and things like that? Have you ever picked up on any of that type of information?
I haven't picked up on that in that way per se. However, when you think about Chiron, who's the centaur, who's the hybrid of horse and centaur's horse-human combination, but also when you think about, I think that if you've seen, and who hasn't seen the movie Avatar, when you see how the humans kind of plug their braid into the horse, there's something about the union of human consciousness and equine consciousness that I think is in our periphery, but maybe again we're not quite seeing it per se yet. I know that in my mind, when I was shown where humanity, when human consciousness and equine consciousness came, when we lived together, we were distinct still from each other living there, and came here as distinct, yet, as we were just talking about, completely integrated consciousness as well. I have not received any. That's not in any way to say that there doesn't exist that somewhere, somehow.
It seems
Would be quite
possible.
beautiful to think about, wouldn't it? And I know people like, science, we have to find an amazing fantasy or science fiction person to tell stories about that. Or maybe that's something that I'll do at some point. I'm not sure. Maybe that'll be the next evolution of the Council of Horses. They'll share something a little bit more that way with me. I'm not sure.
The galactic horses, perhaps.
Yeah.
But they are here. They are healing us. They are doing this incredible work. And there are native cultures, if you think about Native Americans, that seem to have that avatar type connection with the horses, or at least that's what they've taught their tribe members and other people, is that they really did have that psychic link with these horses in a way that Europeans and other people didn't have.
Well, the Bedouin people were certainly, they lived with the horses inside of their tents. The horses were part of the family. The First Nations people, I mean, there's part of what's going on down in the United States is this argument that horses are not indigenous to North America, and that gives them the reason that they need to round them up and remove them from the BLM lands. And the archaeological record actually shows that the first horses were here before the land bridge disappeared. So they weren't just brought over when the Europeans came to settle North America, which is when we tend to think of Native American and First Nations people, the kind of horses that they were riding and living with would have been the colonial descendants of those colonial Spanish bred horses. But the archaeological record shows no, horses have been here much longer, and perhaps even the most ancient horses that still live today would be the Przewalski horses in Mongolia. And so if you think about if the land bridge were still connected between Russia and Canada up in the very far north, that wouldn't be too far of a stretch to see how the Przewalski horses would come across that bridge or have been here at some point. And then the teachings, when we think of the teachings, I was so very, very blessed. I have an amazing Cree elder who's a teacher of mine who taught me the healing song of the white horse. And not that I know that we're on audio, but you and I can see each other. When I was teaching in the prison, the men there called me the white horse woman. And one of the men painted this drum for me.
Oh, it's beautiful. Look at that. It's a beautiful drum. It's black and white colored. It's beautifully painted. It has the stars and galaxies around it. It's very gorgeous.
So it's really beautiful. And here's the woman. So the teachings of different cultures, different First Nations cultures would have different stories about the big dog. And I think it's I'll stop banging that around. And I'll just sit down here.
You're fine.
And the medicine horse, and not just in terms of, because certain horses, because of their coloring, they were considered medicine horses. But for me, in my mind, every horse is a medicine horse. Every horse brings medicine. So my teacher taught me the healing song of the white horse. And so that's something that when I teach medicine horse workshops, I'll sing that song at the end. And it's meant to be, again, a frequency, a tonality that goes out into horse consciousness, that is the healing song for them, as well as it's the healing song from them. So wow. I think that the teachings, the lessons, the storylines, the song lines, if you want to think about Aboriginal people in Australia, that horses and humans have been dancing together, have been creating together since time immemorial. And the First Nations people, the protectors, a lot of times of different species, different bands of horses. One of the cards in the deck is the Choctaw. the Choctaw ponies, and the Choctaw people were, oh, sad, hurts my heart to think about it, were one of the peoples that were relocated at the end of your 1800s, and they were moved along what became known as the Trail of Tears. And so these ponies, these small horses that had been used to living their lives alongside this vibrant people, were now carrying these people to their deaths, and a lot of the horses died along, many of the horses died along the way as well. So the Choctaw card is about that. And I've spent time with the Choctaw horses at Return to Freedom, which is this beautiful wild horse sanctuary down in California. And there's not many Choctaw horses left. They're endangered. They're coming back through breeding programs, but the card is really about how the horses are standing vigil and waiting and hoping for us to find our way back onto the good red road. So it's lovely that you brought that up. And I think that there's so many different horse cultures with their own stories around horses that seems like it would lend itself well to delving into even more.
That's such an intense story. It's like connecting with the emotions of that is just really, really hard. And you know that those horses were absorbing some of that energy. They were taking that on, and that's probably why they were dying, because these other people were dying. They were trying to save as many as they could as they went through this trail of tears. Humans, we're evolving, my God. But then you look back at some of the things that have happened, you're just like, why did we do that? Why was that part of our story? But yet here it is. But
it is.
Yeah. So tell me how you designed the various methods of working with this deck. So there's a 2-card methodology, 3-card, 4-card. How did you dial that part in?
That's so fun. I absolutely love this part. So really wanted there to be, because sometimes people just want to pull one card.
Right.
And we call that the lead mare. For me, that's like the lead mare is going to show up and give you a little kick in the pants or a little nudge or a little cuddle, whatever it is that you kind of need for the day. So that's very much a get up and go. So when you're starting off your morning and you don't have time to really go deep with something, you can just draw a card and you can ask, what is it that I most need to be aware of today? And there's questions that are written in the deck as well, like key questions that you can ask. And they're just guidelines. They're just ways of helping people know or learn or how to begin. If someone's never, because some people are really adept and they work with cards all the time, and other people are curious and new to it. So really wanted to have key questions in here that they could ask or pose to the council. And then the single card draw is something that's so easy for people to do, the lead mare daily card, daily guidance. But then I really loved how paying attention to each of the horses, some of them really lend themselves well to creating different spreads. Like the Kelpie is the resurfacing spread, and it's 2 cards, and it's about, the first card is going to be about what needs to be released or devoured or let go, because the Kelpie is going to take us under the water. It's kind of like going into the chrysalis or the cocoon. When we go there, when we're submerged, we are dismantled, we are dissolved, we are dismembered or devoured. The Kelpie is often known that it would devour us, that it would eat us, that it would drown us. And that can be a very frightening proposition or a very, very frightening idea. However, shamanically speaking, when we are devoured, what that does is it gives us an opportunity to reconstitute ourselves. And that's what's happening under the surface of the water. That's what's happening in the cocoon state, that all the parts of the caterpillar, aka who we are before we go in, are dissolved into this primordial ooze. And then again, depending on intention and belief, who and what do we want to emerge as? So emerge, resurface from the water, or come out of the chrysalis as in the form of a butterfly or a moth. So the second card is about what needs to emerge, and the horses will let us know, hey, here's what you need to let go of, and here's what needs to come out the other side. Here's what you need to emerge as. So I really do love the Kelpie spread. And then There's Eohippus, who you were talking about earlier. And
Yes.
this spread is about the evolution spread. And so it's about what elements from your past can best support your presence. How can you nurture these elements so they can support the evolution of your desired outcome, which could be your self-evolution. And then the third card is how the situation might evolve if you heed the wisdom of the first two cards. So again, I had my hand slapped a couple of times when I was in ceremony, when I was got invited into different ceremonies with the First Nations peoples here. And I asked a question, I think even a couple of years after I had been, before I asked a similar question and kind of had my hand slapped, like, you've already asked that question, but you haven't followed the advice that we gave. So essentially smarten up and do what you were told to do, and then you can come back and ask another question. And that's kind of what Eohippus is saying here is, okay, we're giving you this information, we're offering you this counsel and this guidance, but then it's up to us to be responsible for and about that and to take action around it so that that new reality can, or that new version, that evolution can come to pass.
Wow. That's incredible.
The one there, well, I love them all. Can you tell? I just love them
I mean,
all.
each description has a different function. That's the coolest
It
part.
does.
And it just depends how deep you want to go with it.
Exactly. And the one that I love them all, but there's one called the Council of Horses, which is the Sacred Circle spread. And this is going to be one that bypasses our conscious need to have to know and understand everything. So it's kind of like you write the concern or the goal or the challenge, or you have a representative image of that, and you put it down, and then you draw horses that go around the outside of that, and then you just leave that there. You just allow the horses to work in a non-conscious way for us to be able to bring about resolution or activation around whatever that dream or the goal is. And that's the Council of Horses spread. And I love that one, because sometimes our conscious minds are so busy with everything, and really what we need to do is just to let go and allow.
Right. And not interpret in such a way, just put it all out there in that way.
Yeah.
Ah. And
So-
just really quickly though, how did you come up with these? Did it just intuitive design?
Intuitive, but also like what's important, what are the horses, what have the horses taught me in terms of how they are delivering the messages, and also having worked as a therapist for, almost 30 years now, paying attention to what's helpful in terms of conversations with the people that I'm working with. So where do they usually start, and where do they want to end up, and what helps them get from A to B? What kinds of contemplations, considerations, activations, awarenesses, challenges? Because one of the things that was important to me about this deck, I don't want it all to be rainbows and bubblegum. I want to be kicked in the pants when I need to be kicked in the pants. And there are horses in here that will absolutely do that for you, metaphorically, of course, but you're going to get a jolt. Some of the messages are meant to make us pay attention and wake up. Like the Choctaws, the Brombies, we have to know what's happening with the Brombies down in Australia. We have to be able to pay attention to the crack horse, who literally comes to crack us open in a way like the Irish version of the crack, CRAIC. It's about tipping the apple cart over and not to take our lives too seriously. So when the crack shows up, it's because we are literally burdening ourselves with seriousness, and it's time to smarten up and to crack open to something different. So I really wanted the horses that showed up, sometimes when we need to be held, absolutely, and other times when we need a nudge or more of a blatant, then those messages are going to be there as well.
Right. The bluntness, the realness. Sometimes you need the universe or source communicating through the Council of Horses to just kind of say, hey, no, this is off course. This is how you get back on course. Let's not beat around the bush here. You're off course. This is how you get back on course. And this whole interview, I'm going to say, has been on course. It's an absolutely amazing. I loved this. This is so cool. We could probably go on for a long time, but I know we do have to kind of get going. But I do want to tell people where to find you. Now, SandraWallin.com is one place, but you can also go to chironsway.com. Either one will get you to the place where you can find this information. Now, not only does she have this incredible oracle deck, which I highly recommend, it's available on Amazon and all the places where you can get these things, but she also has mentorship. So if you go to her website, you can actually have a mentorship with Sandra directly. And then the Psyche training, the psych-kinesiology, hopefully I said that correctly.
You did great.
And that is also available. And there's other equine guided programs all on that website. And also, if you love the artwork, which I absolutely loved the artwork, Kim has a site as well, spiritofhorse.com. You can check out, you can see some of her other artwork. What an incredible interview this has been. I'm loving this. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It's been the happiest of Halloweens, Jake. It's been so fun.
Yes, it's fun. That's full of light and love. And before we go, though, is there anything else you'd like to leave our audience with? We've talked about so much. The Council of Horses. There's so much going on there. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us with?
Oh, just the invitation of the horses. They're just waiting for us to come to the field, to the paddock, to the stall, to the deck, to invite them in, to be curious, to be open-hearted, and to be able to, I'll come back to your word because it's a word I use all the time, to be in that place of love, to loving of self, loving of other. I think that that's one of the greatest gifts that horses can teach us, to be present with this emotion, feeling of love, and to, of course, too, to have fun. I think it's kind of fun that we're landing on this day, which for me growing up was always so much fun. I always loved it, but no less sacred in terms of the rituals and the tradition and the stories that go along with Samhain as well. So I just wish everybody a happy Halloween and a happy, joyful rest of the year. And to thank you, Jake, for this really fun and expansive conversation. Inviting the horses into your podcast has been a real blessing and a joy. So thank you.
Thank you. I agree as well. They're here to help with our evolution and ascension in their own way. And there they are. So thank you again. Please hold Sandra through the outro music, and everyone check out the Oracle deck. Go to her website and just take the deep dive into Sandra and see what she's all about. There's so many people that have that love, that deep love for the equine frequency. This is it. If you're feeling that, go check it out. And of course, we'll see you next week, Midnight on Earth.